Hi, I'm Camille Bird O'Quinn, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about disproportionality in special education. Disproportionality in special education refers to the over or under identification of culturally or linguistically diverse students as having a disability. In particular, the minority groups most commonly impacted by this phenomenon are African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and they are at the greatest risk of this occurring. To be clear, significant disproportionality is seen in high incidence disabilities that have more of a subjective qualifying criteria, such as speech language impairment, specific learning disability, or emotional disorder, as opposed to low incidence disabilities such as deaf or hard of hearing or vision impairment. This issue of disproportionality has been well documented for over 40 years and includes contributions as recently as this year from leaders in the field such as Dr. Artiles, Dr. Skiba, and Dr. Ford, pictured here from left to right. Their research focuses on IDEA's 2004's declaration that each state who receives assistance under Part B must determine significant disproportionality based on race and ethnicity. This mandate includes the identification of culturally linguistic diverse students as having disabilities, the placement of minority students in self-contained educational settings, and the incidence, duration, and type of disciplinary actions minority students receive. These incidents include data related to suspensions and expulsions. ISB uses indicators 9 and 10 to track significant disproportionality across the state. Indicator 9 refers to the overall disproportionate representation of culturally linguistically diverse students in special education, and Indicator 10 refers to the disproportionate representation of culturally linguistically diverse students in a specific high incidence disability category, such as speech language impairment, specific learning disability, or emotional disability. ISB uses a detailed formulaic method to calculate disproportionate culturally, linguistically diverse representation of students within school districts. IDEA 2004 mandated that students receive non-discriminatory evaluations within the process of determining eligibility for special education. When evaluations and instruction are culturally responsive, it actively considers and addresses the role of language within the assessment procedure. This should include, among other things, the student's background information, progress monitoring data, use of alternative assessment strategies, and acknowledgement of non-standard procedures. When lawsuits occur related to significant disproportionality, because they do occur, they are typically in conjunction with a variety of laws, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and that includes entities who are often involved, such as the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, the Offices of English Language Acquisition. Many of you are probably familiar with the familiar lawsuit of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which ruled that the separate but equal clause of Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 was unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court ordered that schools desegregate. However, there are other lawsuits that highlight racial discrimination within education, which ultimately led to tracking the frequency in which minority students are inappropriately segregated from their peers. In 1967, Hobson v. Hansen ruled that the tracking of African Americans from lower socioeconomic backgrounds was using standardized testing normed on Caucasians from middle class backgrounds. And in 1970, a similar finding was made in Diana v. Board of Education, which ruled that the WISC and the Stanford Binet administered in English was inappropriate in identifying Spanish-speaking students as having an impairment, and that a student's primary language must be used when completing assessments. Larry P. v. Riles in 1979 ruled that African American students were inappropriately placed in special education due to unfair IQ testing, which failed to recognize the student's cultural background. In fact, these same students were found to not have an intellectual disability when a different IQ test was used. Because of this, it was determined that IQ tests cannot be the sole basis for a placement of students in special education. In 1980, the Pace v. Hannon court case ruled that the Chicago public schools did not discriminate against African Americans in their administration of IQ testing. However, it did highlight federal concerns for significant disproportionality of culturally and linguistically diverse students in special education. And in 1984, Marshall v. Georgian ruled that disproportionate placement of African American students in special education did not occur, but it did highlight that there was no process for students to get the help they needed within the regular education classroom for difficulties with learning or behavior. This ruling strongly influenced the development and the legitimacy of RTI, MTS, and PBIS programs we use today. Now let's fast forward to 2007, and we have the Amber Blunt v. Lower Merion School District case, which alleged that African American students were being disproportionately placed in special education and low-level classes, and that no African Americans were enrolled in advanced or accelerated programs. This case was dismissed and found to be without basis, but it did highlight the awareness of culturally linguistically diverse students' placement in gifted education. And in 2015, in the case of concerned African American parents v. Upper Dublin School District, a group of African American parents contended that the district used discriminatory practices that resulted in higher out-of-school suspensions rates for Black students and the placement of excessive amounts of Black students in lower-level curriculum programs. This case directly points to what we now know as SB 100. The most recent lawsuit related to significant disproportionality was in 2017, when U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos ruled to delay regulations put into place to address significant disproportionality per idea. In response to this, the Council of Parents, Attorneys, and Advocates sued the U.S. Department of Education, accusing them of sidestepping their responsibilities to students with disabilities by delaying a special ed regulation that students with disabilities receive appropriate service no matter what their racial background. This case is still pending. The school district where I work has been impacted by significant disproportionality off and on for over a decade. Most recently, the district was cited in the 2016-2017 school year by ISB for Indicator 9, which monitors the overall disproportionate representation of culturally linguistic students in special education. In particular, my district was cited for identifying too many African Americans as having a disability, which you can see here in the chart on your screen. Even though there are only about 68% students in the district who are African American, African Americans made up almost 75% of the student body with IEPs. The district was also cited under Indicator 10 by ISB during the 2016-2017 school year, which tracks disproportionate representation of culturally linguistically diverse students in a specific disability category. In my district, we were cited for over-identifying students as having a developmental delay, emotional disability, and intellectual disability. This can be seen in the chart on your screen. You can see the discrepancies of the highlighted portions between the district and the state. To address significant disproportionality in special education, systemic change is required. A policy and procedure that would adequately address this long-standing issue in my district is to deliver professional development that enables educators to deliver scientific, research-based academic and behavioral interventions, assessments, services, and supports that incorporates a culturally responsive pedagogy that is directly linked to the core curriculum along with frequent student progress monitoring. Specifically, professional development content should include a multi-tiered intervention model, or MTSS, to include tools to review, evaluate, and revise the district's Tier 1 core instruction, including the overall curricula and delivery of whole group instruction, especially in the areas of reading and math, as well as the development and delivery of Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Also, professional development content should include designing and delivering scientific, research-based, culturally responsive interventions and ways to implement them with integrity and fidelity. Further, requiring that all students participate in the district's MTSS program may help to offer students the assistance they need when they need it before they fail and are ushered into the special education system. Because let's face it, the vast majority of students who receive a referral for a special ed evaluation are, are, eventually placed in special education. Therefore, examining the referral process itself may be an important first step in addressing disproportionality in special education. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you learned lots about disproportionality in special education. See you next time.